with y'all for a second? Okay, cool. We're on the same level. We're on the same page. Okay, cool. We haven't talked about anything yet, but I love Pioneer. I adore Pioneer as a format for Magic the Gathering. And one of my favorite cards to play in Pioneer is part of my Golgari mid-range package. Her name is Henrika Dominathi, or Henrika Dominathi. Henrika is a very, very versatile card in Golgari midrange, giving you access to draw, removal, and even a win con and a stabilization engine against aggro decks. She kind of just does it all. So I want to talk about her, but I don't want to talk about Pioneer right now. I want to talk about Commander still. Maybe we should just build a Commander deck around Henrika. Yeah. That's what we're going to do. Henrika Dominathi is a 4-mana mono black commander. She says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one of the modes that hasn't been chosen yet. 1. Each player sacrifices a creature. Or 2. You draw a card and lose a life. Or 3, transform her into Henrika the Infernal Seer. This card has flying, death touch, lifelink, and the ability to spend 3 mana to give all of your creatures that share the keywords that Henrika has 1/0 until end of turn. Now, Henrika in Pioneer does a lot because she gives you access to all kinds of ways to screw up a game for another player. But for us, I think we're going to use her as the signpost, let's say, of a go-wide commander deck. It's going to be super simple, but it's going to be monocolor, and it's going to be very close to a mid-rangey Pioneer deck, just in commander form instead. So let's first talk about every go-wide deck's favorite topic, Anthems, beginning with Bad Moon. This gives all of our black creatures +1/+1. Warhorn gives all of our attacking creatures +1/+0. Raider Spoils gives all of our creatures 1/0, and if any warrior we control deals combat damage to a player, we then get to draw a card and lose 1 life. And of course, there are 3 warriors in the deck, so sometimes that may actually matter. Speaking of warriors, Paragon of the Open Graves is a warrior. Other black creatures we control get +2/+2, and we can also give another black creature we control Death Touch until end of turn if we tap it and use its ability. Now, note that Henrika has flying and death touch and cares about giving 1/0 to other creatures with death touch. So if a creature does not currently have death touch, Paragon can grant it to them, giving that creature extra bonuses for Henrika. And then we have Draina, Liberator of Malakir. She could also be the commander of this deck too if you wanted, but I'm choosing my freaking Golgari mid-range guy, or girl. So we're going to go with Draina, saying, Draina could also be the commander of this deck in her own right if we wanted her to be, but for now, we're going to go with Henrika being the commander. Draina says that anytime she deals damage to a player, we can put a 1/1 counter on every attacking creature we control. Of course, she has first strike, so she will do damage first and then grant that power to everything else on our board. But that is not the bulk of our deck. The bulk of our deck are going to be these evasive attackers. Each and every one of these has only one job, and that is get on the ground or in the air and punch somebody in the face. This, of course, means that our commander will have plenty of things to grant 1/0 when the time comes. This begins with Battlefly Swarm. It's a flying 1/1 that can be granted death touch on a whim. Dagger Drone Imp is a flying lifelink creature. Ghastly Gloom Hunter is a 1/1 with flying lifelink and kicker. If it was kicked, we get 2 1/1 counters on it. Fetid Imp has flying and can gain death touch until end of turn. Blood Tracker is a 2/2 flyer that can be turned into a powerful draw engine if a board wipe is aimed at us. Westgate Regent has flying, ward, discard a card, and if it deals combat damage to a player, put that many 1/1 counters on it. Sky Scanner draws us a card when it touches the board and has flying. Midnight Assassin has flying and death touch. Fairy Dream Thief has flying and surveil when it touches the board, and the ability to draw us a card from the graveyard. Vengeful Reaper has flying, death touch, and haste with Foretell as well, if that matters to you. Nighthawk Scavenger is basically a Tarmogoyf in the air with Flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink. Bloodthirsty Aerialist says when we gain life, we put a 1/1 counter on her, and she's otherwise a nice 3-mana flyer. Vampire Cutthroat's a 1/1 with Skulk and Lifelink, so it'll always be able to get through. Vault Scourge has Flying and Lifelink. Vampire Nighthawk is the weaker version of the Nighthawk Scavenger, and Tivosh Gloom Summoner says at the beginning of our end step, if we've gained life this turn, we can convert all of that life into an XX Black Demon creature token with Flying. Oh my. If we happen to lose any of our cards throughout the game, we've got a 4-card recursion package, beginning with the Vane Witch's Cavern. Anytime we gain life, we can pay black mana, and if we do, return any creature card from our graveyard to our hand. Then we have Draina the Last Blood Chief. It has Flying, and whenever she attacks, a defending player chooses any non-legendary creature in our graveyard, and we get that card on the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on top of it. Since most of our creatures are just flying keyword soups, it doesn't matter what we grab as long as we get more of it. From the Catacombs gives us the initiative and also allows us to get any creature from our graveyard onto the battlefield. It can also escape from our graveyard to be cast again. And yeah, now that we've talked about the initiative, we should probably point out that this is also a dungeon deck again. That's right, I didn't just drag you into a pseudo-pioneer deck. This is also a deck based on the fucking dungeon. So let's talk about how the dungeon works. If the initiative happens, we are forced into the Undercity. If we are not using the initiative, we get a choice between the Tomb of Annihilation, the Lost Mine of Phandelver, and the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Since we talked about the initiative, let's talk about the Undercity first. If we go into the Undercity, anytime we gain the initiative, which is gotten by either hitting somebody in the face who has the initiative, or being ourselves and just casting a card that lets us go into the dungeon or says take the initiative, we go down any of these rooms. So we have to first start at the top one, Secret Entrance. This gets any basic land from our deck and puts it into our hand. Then we get to choose in down order any of the rooms we want to go through. So from Secret Entrance, we can choose to either go through the Forge or Lost Well. From Lost Well, we can choose the Arena or Stash, and from the Stash, we can choose only Catacombs. And after Catacombs, we have to go into the Throne of the Dead 3. It is always going to be going down from wherever you happen to be. So you can start in Secret Entrance, getting your basic land, put 2/1/1 counters on the Commander in the Forge the next time you go to the dungeon, use the Trap to make a player lose 5 life, draw a card from the archives, and then, of course, go into the Throne of the Dead 3 to reveal the top 10 cards of your library, throw a creature on the board, give it 3/1/1 counters, and give it hexproof until the turn cycle is over. If we play any of our other dungeon cards, we are likely going into the Lost Mines of Phandelver, which says we can scry 1 and gives us tokens in treasure or goblin form afterwards. Then lets us force everybody to lose a life when we gain a life, and then draws us a card at the very end. That's the most efficient one to go through if you want to speed run the dungeon. If you want to gamble a little more, though, you might want to go to the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. You gain a life when you get into this dungeon, then you scry 1, and then afterwards you get your choice of either making a treasure token or making a creature unable to attack. Afterwards, you scry 2, and then you get the choice of either impulse drawing 2 cards and being able to play them immediately, or making 2 skeletons. Then you scry 3, and you finally end on the Mad Wizard's Lair, which lets you draw 3 cards, reveal them, and cast any one of them without paying its mana cost. Honestly, it is a souped-up Lost Mines of Phandelver on crack, but you really have to try hard to get through it. So if you end up wanting to go through and do that dungeon, that is entirely on you. I do not always recommend it, but it's an option you have. That said, back to the recursion package, we have Fate's Reversal, which can put a creature from our graveyard into our hand, and it of course lets us venture into a dungeon after doing so. We also have more ways to go into the dungeon past that. 6 of them, in fact. Yuntai Fangblade is a death touch creature, so it benefits from our commander, and anytime it deals combat damage to a player, we go into the dungeon. Underdark Explorer has Menace, and we get the initiative anytime it enters the battlefield. Passageway Seer has Lifelink, and anytime it enters the battlefield, we take the initiative. At the beginning of our end step, we get to put a 1/1 counter on it if we have the initiative. Ravenloft Adventurer is probably the strongest of all of our dungeon cards, giving us the ability to cuck anybody who's playing a Reanimator deck. As we get the initiative when this comes onto the board, and if an opponent's creature would die, we exile the card with a hit counter on it. And everything else doesn't really matter too much past that. Vicious Battle Rager lets us take the initiative when this touches the board, and if it becomes blocked, then our opponent will lose 5 life. Trailblazer Torch enters the battlefield and gives us the initiative, and if the equipped creature with this is blocked, we deal 2 damage to every creature that is blocking it. So if somebody stack blocks our commander, we could probably just annihilate all of their tokens as soon as we have this. All in all, I adore the dungeon as a mechanic, and I will do everything in my power to force it into a deck violently if necessary, so that I can have my way and play more dungeon shit. That said, let's talk about drawing cards. As this is a monocolored deck, our draw package is pretty simple. We begin with Feed the Infection. It lets us draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. Ambition's Cost and Ancient Craving are doing the same thing. Greed lets us pay 2 life and draw a card, and since our commander lets us get lots of life, this is a pretty easy thing to sustain. War in Heaven lets us draw 3 cards and lose 3 life, and then it has more modes afterwards, making us mill 3 cards, and then choosing 3 target creatures from our graveyard and reviving them as long as their total mana value is 8 or less, and then it gives them artifact creature status. Now this is super easy for us to exploit because most of our creatures are 2 and 3 mana, and they don't really do a whole lot. They only matter when the commander is on the board, granting them the extra 1/0 every time we pay mana into it. Read the Bones lets us scry 2 and draw 2 and lose 2. Hostile Negotiations lets us exile the top 3 of our library in 2 face-down piles, and then we get to flip one of those piles face up. 1 pile of 3 is up, 1 pile of 3 is down. Our opponent gets to choose which pile they want us to have, one that they know and one that they don't. Sometimes they give us really cool shit, sometimes it whiffs entirely, but most of the time you end up going positive, and it creates a very fun dynamic with the table I've seen. Promise of Power says we can draw 5 cards and lose 5 life when we cast it, or we can make a black demon creature token where X is the number of cards in our hand as it enters the battlefield. If we have a lot of mana, we can entwine both of these abilities, so honestly, this is a super fun one to hold on to late in the game. Well of Lost Dreams says anytime we gain life, we can pay X mana where X is the life we gained, and if we do, we can draw X cards. So that means if our commander hits somebody for 3, we can pay 3 or less mana to draw that many cards. Honestly, it's very, very useful card draw. This plus Blood Tracker means we have about 10 different ways to draw cards out of the deck, not counting incremental draw that is stapled to other cards. This should allow us to dig through our deck at a decent pace and play with the entire table. Of course, let's be honest, what use is playing with the entire table when we can instead cuck them out of their ability to play cards? Let's talk about our 13-card removal package, beginning with the Ghastly Death Tyrant. When this enters the battlefield, we can blow up any enchantment that an opponent controls. We can also give all of our creatures Death Touch until end of turn, which has wonderful synergies with our commander. I've chosen Ghastly Death Tyrant since we don't have that many ways to kill enchantments in black, so every way we gain access to is going to be gravy. Meteor Golem gives us access to Omni removal, so again, anything we can do to blow up things that black normally suffers with is what we are going to go for. Also, it's Meteor Golem. I found a way to fit it in every deck, don't worry. Then we have Precipitous Drop, which lets us go into the dungeon or give a creature -2/-2. If we've already finished a dungeon, however, we give a creature -5/-5. Grave Lighter lets us make everybody sacrifice a creature and is also a flyer in her own right. Patron of the Vein blows up a creature an opponent controls and gives our vampires a 1/1 counter, like our commander. Feed the Swarm blows up an artifact or a creature or an enchantment. Hero's Downfall blows up a creature or a planeswalker. Overseer of the Damned enters the battlefield blowing up any creature and makes 2/2 black zombies every time our opponents lose things. Butcher of Malakir is a flying vampire that says anytime our creatures die, our opponents lose creatures too. Obnixilis Reignited blows up creatures or draws us cards, depending on what we need. Dalek Drone blows up a creature and makes a player lose 3 life when it comes onto the board. It's also a flying menace creature, so it just lets us get closer to winning the game anyway. Then we have Draina again. We have 3 different Drainas in this deck. She may as well be the lieutenant of the deck. She gives a creature -X, -O, -X until end of turn, and gives herself +X/+O until end of turn by paying 2 black mana and X. So if something has 3 toughness, we pay 5 mana. Draina becomes a 7/4, and the creature dies. Then we have Rankle, Master of Pranks, with flying and haste, and the ability to draw us cards, make everybody discard cards, or make everybody sack creatures whenever he swings. Honestly, the Rankle Spankle is one of the easiest ways to put people on the back foot, as he just has so many different ways to take advantage of his swing. But we have 2 board wipes to talk about as well, beginning with Decree of Pain. This blows up all creatures and draws us a card for every card destroyed this way. We are a mono black deck, so every way we have to cheese the draw system, we are going to try to take advantage of. Necromantic Selection blows up all creatures and then lets us revive any creature of our choice from among the ones who have been slain, which is honestly a good enough reason to pay the 7 mana into this card's hefty mana cost. But, speaking of mana, some of these cards, they're kind of expensive. I wonder how we're going to afford them. We will be affording these cards because of our 8-card ramp package. It's the smallest ramp package I've made for a deck in a very long time. But let's begin with Wayfarer's Bauble so that I can, copy the entire shtick of another YouTuber's channel. And this lets us get a basic land out of the deck when we need it. Charcoal Diamond and Ornithopter of Paradise are basic 2 mana rocks. Dungeon Map is a mana rock that gives us the ability to venture into the dungeon when we need it to. Unstable Obelisk gives us more ways to blow up problematic cards while also being a mana rock in its own right. Mind Stone's a 2 mana rock that can be sacked to draw a card later when we need it to. Heraldic Banner will give all of our black creatures 1/0, and also is a mana rock. And finally, Saravok's Tome gives us the initiative when it touches the board. If we have the initiative, instead of tapping for 1 mana, it taps for 2 mana. And of course, its final ability says, pay 3 and tap it. Exile the top card of our library until we exile a non-land card. We can cast it without paying its mana cost if we've completed a dungeon. Just free Cascade for playing the deck as intended. That's honestly a pretty good way to sign me up for any card. But we do need to end with our mana package, which I'm doing something very silly. We're running only 33 swamps, a single Myriad Landscape, and a Dungeon Descent. The Dungeon Descent lets us go into the dungeon if we have a legendary creature to tap whenever we want. That's how we're going to be building the mana package. We're not going for efficiency here, we're going for memes. This is just a bunch of stuff that I love crammed into one 99 card pile. That's what this is. And if I love it, then it's probably cancer. Maybe you'll love it too, though. Let's find out. Let's do a gameplay test and see how it's done. So, taking a look at our opening hand, we actually have a pretty playable hand. We have the ability to get our commander out on turn 3, and that's not that bad at all. We also could play Saravok's Tome if we need it, but I think we're going to go with the commander. So, let's go ahead and draw our first card and play our swamp for turn. Next turn comes up, we play another swamp, we go ahead and tap 2, get a Mind Stone out, ready to get us new cards when the next turn comes around. Finally, we have turn 3. We're going to go ahead and tap all of our resources, get our commander on the board, and we get to choose one of her modes. Let's go ahead and go with the drawing a card mode, since unless we have something super threatening to deal with, we want to go ahead and keep that sacrificing a creature mode for later. The next turn is going to come up, and on turn 4, we have a couple of options. We can get our commander online, or we can remove a threat from everybody's board. And for my take, I think paying 4 mana into the Saravok's Tome to give us the initiative, getting us a basic land out of the deck, and then paying 2 mana to get the Vault Scourge down is the right move. And I'm doing this because the next mode I want to select on the commander is the one that makes everybody sacrifice a creature. Let's put everybody back and lose our Vault Scourge. The next turn is going to come around, and we get the next mode of our initiative. The mode we're going to pick on this is going to be the ability to scry 2, so we can go ahead and make sure that our next draw is something that we want. With the Trailblazer's Torch and a Hostile Negotiations, I think I'm okay with both of our options. So let's go ahead and keep those in, draw our Hostile Negotiations, and keep that Trailblazer's Torch there and available for us. This means we can go ahead and play a swamp for our turn, and we've got access to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana. We can do anything we want with this, so let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got access to. We've got Draina, who says that anytime that she attacks, defending player chooses a non-legendary card in their graveyard, and we return that to our battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it. That's pretty good, honestly. Westgate Regent would be super scary to play on all of our opponents. Necropolis Regent would be too. Let's go ahead and assume that our opponents have spent a little bit of time trying to rebuild after we've hit their boards. So let's play Gravelighter, sacking itself, making our opponents lose all of their boards, and we'll follow it up once more with the Westgate Regent. Now, when we flip our commander, because we don't have any other modes available, we get to swing with our commander and hold the Westgate Regent up to defend our initiative. This will give us some life and puts us in an okay spot. We already knew we were going to have the Trailblazer's Torch, so we draw that, and we use the Westgate Regent to defend ourselves, so we've kept the initiative. Our next mode on the initiative is either making a treasure token or goading a creature. Right now, I don't think we need the mana, really. We are not hurting for that in any way, shape, or form. So I think the mode we're supposed to choose is goading a creature. Not because we necessarily need a creature goaded, but goading a creature does prevent somebody from getting the initiative back from us, and also the most important part is we want that draw card from the archives. We don't need the skeleton token. Let's tap 4 mana and get the Vengeful Reaper on the board with Flying Death Touch and Haste, and let's go ahead and swing onto our opponent. We're going to keep our commander up, I think, because honestly, having a Flying Death Touch lifelinker is enough to prevent people from doing anything too important to us. So we're going to go ahead and swing the Westgate Regent and the Vengeful Reaper, or the commander, depending on what the board state looks like, at somebody who needs to be hit. The Westgate Regent will, of course, put himself up to 8/8 for hitting anybody, and we need to hold up this 4 mana here. The reason we're holding up the 4 mana is as we pass on turn 6, everybody has established boards and established strategies. People know that we are going to try to hold on to the initiative as long as possible, and they know that we are not swinging all of our creatures in so that we can keep the initiative for ourselves. This means that if we do not have mana up, people are going to assume that we have access to some kind of removal as long as our mana is up and available. We don't, but we do have an instant cast Hostile Negotiations we can use at any point. So we wait a turn cycle, and right before our turn begins, we tap our 4 and we play our Hostile Negotiations, because now we don't have a reason to hold up that mana. The Hostile Negotiations gives us 2 piles, one with Feed the Swarm, Well of Lost Dreams, and Vampire Nighthawk, a very good pile nobody will want us to have. The other pile says Fetid Imp, Swamp, and Ancient Craving. So, in this situation, the best thing to do is to establish what kind of board or what kind of people you're playing with. If they are new people, then showing them the powerful hand so that they think about these cards being even more powerful may be the play. If they are players who are known to call your bluffs, though, then go ahead and pick the weak hand, since it doesn't really matter either way. Just figure out the kind of players you're playing with and mind game as you need. Remember, one of these is going to be face down. For me, I'm going to go ahead and say the Ancient Craving is the one we get no matter what, as it is the weaker of the 2 hands, and statistically it's more likely we are going to get the worst end of the stick on Hostile Negotiations. But even the worst end of the stick on that is still a draw 3. Now, we get to go a little further into the dungeon. We get to do the archives to draw a card. With our hand the way it is, we're actually pretty well set up. We can go ahead and play this Swamp, and we can pay 1, 2, 3, 4, and play the Trailblazer's Torch. This will give us the initiative once more, which will finish our Undercity, allowing us to reveal the top 10 of our library and play any creature for free from them. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Now, in an awkward twist, all 10 cards, only one of them ended up being a creature, and it's the Vicious Battle Rager. This isn't the worst thing in the world, though. So the Vicious Battle Rager will touch the board automatically, and when it does, it's given 3 1/1 counters and hexproof. This means we get the initiative again because we've got the Vicious Battle Rager, which will let us pick a basic land out of our deck and put it into our hand. Now, we can go ahead and take all of these cards, put them into the deck, and reshuffle because we did the initiative. And while we would have preferred a better creature coming out, it's not the worst thing in the world to get another land out of our deck for our Undercity. With 5 mana available, we can go ahead and pay 2 of it and put the Bad Moon down. This powers up our board. Now we can swing out with all of our creatures. We've done the initiative once, so we don't really care about it as much as we might once have. Now that our dungeon is finished, Savok's Tome has the ability to get us free cards from the top of our library as long as our opponents let this stay on the board. So we can swing in with everything, and we get 1/0 to our entire board if we choose. So our board is swinging for a pretty high amount. If we don't have anything to use this mana on, we do, we can go ahead and spend it into Henrika. We don't need it, so instead we're just going to hit somebody, and that's going to make the Westgale Regent gain 9 1/1 counters. It's 9 because Bad Moon is giving the Westgate Regent 1/1. So we have this huge Westgate Regent that needs to be dealt with, a commander who can power up a board, and a Flying Death Touch Haster that we can put into the back lines if need be to block a dragon if that ends up coming up. As it stands right now, I think what I would probably do is make sure that we've got some removal up for a following turn. So I'm going to put that Unstable Obelisk out. It's mana in the worst of times and removal every other time. Turn 8 comes up, and we've got another way to enter the dungeon with Fate's Reversal. We also get the Undercity trigger of Scrying 2, and I'm thinking that we're going to go ahead and keep our hand exactly as it is. I don't hate the cards we have. I don't hate Fate's Reversal, so we're where we want to be. If we lose Westgate Regent, we can use the Fate's Reversal to get it back, and as it stands, we have a couple of options. The first one, though, the most important one, is activating our Savok's Tome. Since we have this now, we have no reason anymore to care about the cards in our hand if we don't need to. So we're going to exile until we exile a non-land card. We can then cast that card as we want. We exiled and hit a Necromantic Selection. Now, there's 2 scenarios here. Scenario 1, we are on the back foot, which means our board might not look like this, and we cast the Necromantic Selection and get everything set back to where we're comfortable. Scenario 2, we're on the front foot. We are the aggro right now, which with this board state, we could be the aggro pretty easily. If that is the case, then we don't need to use the Necromantic Selection at all. If that happens, then we just keep these cards in exile and don't worry about them at all. We have a lot of mana we can use, so let's go ahead and swing our commander and all of our board. If we want, we can go ahead and pump up our board to give them lethal with our commander. It's a pretty simple strategy, but giving 6 power to this kind of board is plenty, actually. That's making our Westgate Regent swing effectively for 20 damage, on top of our Vengeful Reaper being able to swing for 5, and our commander swinging for 6, when you count the Bad Moon that's on our board. This likely kills a player, and then takes the Westgate Regent up to auto-lethal levels. There's no way that somebody's going to let the Westgate Regent stay alive in this situation, but that's not what really matters here. The point is, we easily get him to that stage. And as long as this artifact is on the board, we no longer care if our cards get killed. We just get more free cards from the top of our deck and keep chugging on that way. Now, as this is a pet deck with a made-up strategy made solely to mimic the way that I like playing in a completely different Magic format, upgrades are a bit difficult to suggest. But if I were to suggest one, and I had to with a gun to my head, I would suggest changing the deck entirely into a Vampires deck with Henrika at the top. So many vampires have the keywords that she cares about, so let's talk about those. Markov Baron has Convoke and Lifelink is one of the keywords on Henrika, so she cares about that. She gives all other vampires 1/1 as well. Crossway Troublemakers gives vampires Death Touch and Lifelink, which means anyone that does not already have Henrika's keywords now have them. It also has a draw spell attached to it. Champion of the Dusk is another way to draw cards. Sanctum Seeker allows us to have more ways to burn our opponents down. Anawan gives us another way to make everybody sacrifice cards. Sangromancer gives us lots of life gain in the deck. Miri the Curse has all the keywords we care about with our commander. Bloodlord Vasagoth has Bloodthirst, and whenever we cast a vampire, we get Bloodthirst on that as well, meaning that if an opponent's dealt damage, then this creature enters the battlefield with 3/1/1 counters. A very powerful way to build the deck. Darkstar Augur is a Bat Warlock that, while it's not actually a vampire, gives us a very good draw engine that we can take advantage of because we're gaining so much life with all the vampires with our commander as well. Vampire of the Dire Moon, super simple, Death Touch and Lifelink, I love it. Vito, Thorn of the Dust Rose gives us the ability to turn all of the lifelinking that our vampires and our commander is doing into damage. Nirkana Revenant gives us a mana doubler on top of being a vampire. Vein Ripper says whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do as a vampire. And Bloodline Keeper gives us a way to make vampire creature tokens. It also has a transform ability, which gives other vampires +2/+2. Honestly, Bloodline Keeper is probably one of the first ones to go for if you are upgrading this deck into a vampire deck. With that said, though, I really don't think there's much more to go on with this commander. I just really wanted to build her. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. This is a much more simple video than normal. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fire Shard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full-time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full-time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one.